Awesome. Hi, guys. So welcome to the GGLeagues Esports 101 panel. I'm going to be your host, Ivy O'Shaughnessy. If you don't know about me, I am the Partner Success Manager here at GGLeagues. I'm sure if you are a Parks and Recreation individual, you have worked with me in the past. This panel is essentially going to be a comprehensive overview of the world of esports. We want to demystify this. I'm sure some of you at home probably have children who are obsessed with Fortnite or Rocket League or Smash, or any of the other multitude of esport titles that we currently see kids play nowadays. We have a awesome lineup of panelists here kind of before us that'll kind of help kind of dive into this world of esports and make it a much less scary place than I know a lot of you kind of think it is. So I'm going to go down the list here, and I'm going to introduce everybody, and kind of from there off, we can kick off into the questions. So kind of going first, we have Grant Parandaki. Grant is the Vice President of Esports Business at the Washington Justice, which is DC's Overwatch League franchise. Grant was recipient of both the Sports Business Journal New Voices Under 30 and the Front Office Sports Rising 25 Awards, highlighting his innovation and leadership within the esports industry. Grant earned his undergraduate degree, a Bachelor of Science in Neuroscience, in 2014 from Tulane University, where he was also an accomplished oboist in the university orchestra. Next, also coming from the Washington Justice, we have Aaron Pre-Heckman, who is the General Manager of the Overwatch League team. He is also with the Washington Justice, like I said. After entering the league in its inaugural year as a data analyst with the New York Excelsior, which is another Overwatch team, Aaron has climbed the ranks from analyst to coach to assistant GM, and finally to his current role running competitive operations for the Justice. Leaving behind careers in consulting and tech, Aaron brings a background in traditional startup operations to the team and focuses not only on developing his roster's players, but also in developing skills and abilities to help them beyond gaming. So we have two Washington Justice individuals here. They can kind of answer on the pro side of things, as well as kind of any back-end questions you might have. Next, we have Hawk Nelson. Hawk is a partnerships manager for the NRG esports space in Chicago. Since starting at NRG, Hawk launched partnerships for Hot Pockets, McDonald's, Levi's, and the General Insurance. Previously, Hawk worked at a sports marketing agency where he launched one of the first major collegiate events to be broadcast on ESPN in 2020, which is super cool. And then we were supposed to have Keith Kennedy. Unfortunately, I think he did have to miss. So I will be covering most of the collegiate aspects, anything like that. A little background about me. I initially started the esports program at Ohio University back when I was a sophomore, I believe. I worked on that for about 3 years. And then once I graduated, I worked on the esports program for another year, kind of as an esports advisor of sorts. Bobcat Esports, which is the Ohio University esports group, kind of quickly grew from like 20 players to quickly around 800 on our Discord server. We have a top 4 Rocket League team in the nation, and we have a multitude of other games within Ohio University. Nowadays, I'm here at GGLeagues as your Partner Success Manager. I primarily help with Parks and Recreation folks trying to figure out different ways in which they can bring esport leagues to our community. So it's great to meet you guys. I am super excited to start this, and we can just kind of kick it off. So I'm going to start this off with a pretty broad, vague question. I'm not going to explain what esports is, because I assume at this point most people kind of know generally kind of what the scene is. But just kind of as a whole, how have you seen esports affect communities in the past, just from your experience of your professional life as well as your personal life within gaming? And anybody can start. I know this is kind of a open table discussion.
This is the awkward moment of who wants to go first. Well, I'll start and say, first off, thanks for having us on the panel. I think it's always really exciting whenever we have the chance to, just share a little bit about what we're doing over here at the Justice, and how we've been able to, kind of build a community here in the DMV around Overwatch and around esports. I think, Aaron and I have certainly seen how esports can affect communities throughout not only our time here at the Justice, but in kind of previous roles as well. Esports, really the beauty lies in that it is a competitive outlet for everyone, right? You don't have to be, Hawk and I were joking about how Shaquille O'Neal is an investor in NRG and obviously an infamous basketball player. You don't need to be Shaq to be good at esports. You don't need to be 6'5", 6'7". You don't need to be particularly athletic. You just have to be really dedicated and kind of determined in your craft to compete in esports and to play at a really high level. And so I think that's one of the really kind of magical things about esports, that you don't need kind of the physical attributes that you see in traditional sports that are required for you to be kind of successful in those outlets. That in esports you can be anyone and you can compete at a really high level. And esports, at the end of the day, it's all about bringing everyone together, right? We operate professional franchises that kind of operate in at the top tier of play. We sign athletes and have them compete and in a league structure. But esports can be as small as having a club and playing together and playing with your friends and winning a couple of bucks at the end of the week or whatnot. And it can be as big as a multi-million-dollar league or whatnot. So esports kind of has a multitude of ways that it can affect communities, and I think we've kind of seen it all over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. At least from the community side of things, I grew up playing League of Legends. That's kind of how I got my start in the space, and my community was my friends that I played League of Legends with at my local high school, and we would compete in local tournaments. We'd compete in online tournaments, and that led me to building up that passion that wanted me to pursue being involved with the esports community at college when I went to university, and then even to my position today at Energy Esports. So esports really can really foster and create that sort of community and belonging that I think could be missing from some people that aren't involved with more traditional sports growing up. Like I definitely was never going to be on the basketball team at my high school or anything like that, but I could be more involved, say, with our League of Legends program, if there had been one at the time when I was in high school.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things about esports is you can have kind of that local experience that Hawk was describing, but also it's such a low barrier to just a global community. I think a lot of sports when I was growing up, it's like it's neighborhood kids, it's kids in my high school, friends that I had in the area. But esports really opens the world, literally the world, to you in terms of who you can meet and who you can create that community with. When we were building our team, I created a friendship with a coach, a South Korean coach that was coaching a Chinese team. And we kind of helped each other out and just booked some scrimmages together when we were in a tight spot. And then it just so happened that they were going to have a game in Dallas, and I was in Austin, Texas at the time. So we both met up in Texas, kind of exchange information. And then a year and a half down the road, Grant and I were looking for a new head coach for our team. And that was the guy that we pulled in, someone that was in a South Korean in China that we'd met in Texas, and is now in DC, the head coach of our team. And so I think that's one of the really special things about esports is it's such a low barrier to entry to meet such a global and diverse community of people.
And so it's really interesting because especially kind of with our demographic, you see a lot of these like kids that are like 8 to 12 or even like 16 and below getting really into it, either like competitively or even in terms of like kind of running these old communities. Like I've seen kids way younger than I was when I first started with esports, like actually like moderating like Discord servers and running tournaments and things like that. That's actually kind of a good slide into our next question from Giamone Bojangles. I think I said that right, which is what advice would y'all give to anyone looking for smaller esports communities to get involved with?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. We actually had a really cool experience recently where we're located in DC, there's a charter school right across the street from us, DC basis, and we did a small tour where we had students come in, and they had a very similar question. They're at this point where they've kind of done the casual, like what I compare to like the playing basketball at the YMCA kind of thing, where they just kind of meet up with friends. Then a couple of them figured out, hey, like I'm actually pretty good at this, but I'm not going to get any better necessarily just like playing pickup with my friends. And so there's actually to the point that Ivy was saying, just getting online and starting to dig around for these communities. A lot of them are online and they're out there. So in the league that we're in Overwatch, there's this thing called Open Division. So if you kind of compare us to something like baseball, we are like what you would call the major leagues. We have something called contenders, which is like the minor leagues. Then there's something called Open Division, which anybody like Ivy, Hawk, Grant, myself, and two other people can make an Overwatch team, and we could compete in the Open Division. And it's finding communities like that where you kind of quickly realize, like, am I into esports for this kind of fun pickup, like spontaneous nature of it, or do I want to kind of flip that switch? And a lot of times when you start getting into those organized community events, you start realizing there's a whole other side to esports, competitive wise, which requires kind of discipline and organization. And then you're starting to say, was this a hobby, or is this something that I want to try and turn into like a career or something a little bit more serious. So I think obviously my knowledge is a little bit biased to Overwatch, but I think in most leagues there are kind of these open division equivalents, local tournaments where you can just throw a group together and just kind of get a taste for it and say like, okay, is kind of organized gameplay something I'm interested in, or is this more of just like the casual scene?
Yeah, I want to bounce off that. I was actually on an amateur Overwatch team, gold level, so obviously not anything pro. But I was on an amateur like gold Overwatch team for like 3 years, and even if you don't plan on going pro, obviously just join in if you want to get better at gaming as a whole. Just joining those like amateur teams and participating in like the community-led leagues and tournaments is such a good way to kind of hone in those skills, and especially learn like traits that kind of follow over to other games. And I'd honestly like attribute my time on like my amateur Overwatch team to like certain successes I have in my professional life too. Just as far as like communication, working with the team, scheduling, things like that. Any way in which you can like even join like an amateur team, it does not have to be like pro level, is so healthy in terms of like just learning how to kind of like work with yourself, and especially like on the gaming side of things, kind of hone in specific skills like that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think I would just add like the bar is so low, right? I think when I first got to DC, I had a couple of friends who were involved in some different organizations, and I was kind of the mutual connection between them, and they were like, let's just throw an esports happy hour, right? And so we all got like a couple $100 from our organizations, and we're like, hey, if you do something cool in the area, like in esports or in gaming, or like you want to learn more about it, like just come out and we'll buy the first round's on us, kind of thing. And we had 250 people come to our first event, and we were like, wow, like none of them really knew that there were so many organizations in the area doing like really cool things, and were involved in the scene. And all it took was just like 4 people who were honestly kind of bored on a random Saturday to say, hey, let's all go meet up at a bar and get some drinks, right? So I think if you're kind of in, and again, applying to kind of younger audiences as well, like if you're looking to be a part of a larger community, like just put yourself out there, right? And see if you can be the piece that kind of pulls everyone else together. And maybe you host like a weekly conference or a weekly game night or something. And that's what starts, getting you introduced to all the other awesome stuff that people are kind of doing.
So that's really good kind of leeway into like the next question, which is, as we said before, like a lot of this is kind of based on the younger generation starting to kind of get into esports as it slowly becomes like less of a taboo thing of like working in video games to something that is like a very like largely grown industry that is very viable to get into. How do you think you're going to see like both the industry and the community grow as we kind of see this like newer, younger, like 2000s era generation of kind of kids like shift into like both the professional and like the player kind of field of esports?
I can jump in on that one. So I get a really cool perspective on that. So part of my job is for the Washington Justice. I do a lot of the player scouting, and Grant and I then sign the contracts for our players. And so we get to see a lot of people that have been in the esports industry for a while and kind of know their way around. And we also get to see a lot of people that like this is their first stab at trying to be competitive in esports. And we get like a lot of interesting conversations with people that care for these kids, be it their parents or guardians or people that are trying to get a feel for like what is this industry, where is it going. And the interesting perspective that we have is that we're actually a roster that has historically been mixed. So we get a lot of people from South Korea and also a lot of people from the US. And South Korea, I think, is a really interesting example of where kind of going to your parents and saying, I want to be a professional gamer, is something that they've been hearing for a lot longer than folks have been hearing here. And because there's this infrastructure and there's this kind of ecosystem that has been built for that, they've kind of become this hub for this, and we're kind of seeing the inklings of that now in the US as well. And so I think it's not as crazy when someone, maybe 10 years ago was like, oh, mom or dad, I want to go play Halo for money. Like that was like ridiculous. It's like, no, like go to school. But now you look at people like Grant, myself, Hawk, Ivy, people that like, hey, maybe they can go and they can make it. Maybe they can go and they can be a professional gamer. Maybe they can be a professional streamer. Like Twitch is this platform that didn't exist 10 years ago. So maybe you're not the most skilled gamer, but maybe you're really entertaining. And then maybe you're like myself and, I'm never going to click heads professionally. But I have a really a great background in operations and management. And so I think as esports gets this foothold, there's just going to be more and more investment because like there's this safety net now where it's like, I'm not putting all of my eggs in the I can be the best gamer basket. It's that there's this whole ecosystem kind of supporting that career move now.
Yeah, I tried to convince Aaron to sign me to a player contract. He keeps telling me no for some reason. I guess like Plat like just doesn't cut it in OWL. Like I don't really understand. Yeah, I mean I feel like I've like lived what so many I feel like parents and kids are going through now. I grew up when esports was not really a thing. I played a game called World of Warcraft at a really high level throughout high school. I thought I was the coolest kid in school because I was getting paid like $500 a month, and that was like pro back then. Like that was like you made it. Like you're getting paid $500. Like holy crap! Like you're crushing it. And I have two very traditional parents. They're both PhD economists. They kind of went the very traditional route through school and built businesses on their own. And they were like, "What are you doing? Like stop playing video games. Like you are literally wasting your life." And like we are not going to let you do it. And so I was on a path where look, I was a neuroscience major, right? Like I was supposed to go to med school. I think everything in my life was kind of pointed toward like you are doing this whether you like it or not, and I didn't like it. Spoiler alert. And thankfully for me, like I caught a couple of lucky breaks in terms of LCS like really started coming online when I was kind of finishing up school. I found my way into an MBA program and thankfully was successful at that. And, found my way into an esports startup that, I kind of took the job at and didn't tell my parents, right, for a while and until it was kind of too late. Right. And so, and obviously it worked out for me, but I think, for parents and kids out there nowadays, right, like, esports has become a real industry, right? There are actual roles, there are collegiate programs, there are collegiate scholarships for folks who want to pursue esports. There are, meaningful, careers that folks can pursue in the industry. And, I think if you're a parent, it doesn't mean you should let your kid, play 18 hours of Fortnite and fail all their classes, but it does mean that like you should kind of, try to understand where kids are coming from nowadays, saying, hey, like we're really interested in this field, we're really interested in this game or this kind of industry, like and help educate them on like what opportunities are out there, whether on the professional side, on the publisher side, on the agency side, and kind of just recognize that it's not all just a waste of time. I think would be the only takeaway that I'd have.
Yeah, absolutely. I dropped out of college when I was 19, 6 years ago to go pursue my dream of esports, and I worked. I don't know how big the League of Legends crowd is here, but I dropped out to coach a challenger team called Team Fusion back in the day, 6 years ago, and I remember my parents were not very happy with me when I did that. They, worked very hard to get me to college and get me to that point, and to leave and go do that was definitely not something that they were counting on or planning for, and nor was I, if I'm being perfectly honest. But they eventually came around to it and became a lot more supportive, and they're incredibly supportive of me and my esports endeavors now. But I can't even imagine if I were 19, if I were in high school right now, and seeing how much more the esports as a proof of concept for like careers has changed even in just the past 6 years. And now I can show, look, we got brands like Hot Pockets, Levi's, McDonald's are all spending in the space. This is a very real thing. And there's very much a career path that you can have, even if you're not one of these people that's clicking heads professionally. So it's crazy to see how much has changed in such a short period of time. And there's so many different ways for people that are passionate about the space to get involved. It's really so awesome to see.
So here's kind of a good like follow-up question. Is with our youth getting more into esports and stuff like that, how do you think esports as like a community and industry that is getting bigger and bigger, how do you think esports affects our youth, either for good or for bad?
I think there's so much more there's so many more positives to it than any negatives that could be brought up as a counterbalance to it. I think I said this back towards the beginning of the panel, that the kinds of kids that you're engaging with esports and these gaming communities are not the same kinds of kids that would be on the basketball team, that would be on the football team. These are the kids that you're doing pickup baseball. They're the kids that are getting picked last. There's no way anyone wants them on the kickball team. Typically, at least that was the case
no, we
for
at
me.
least make the kickball team. Come on now.
But you're essentially engaging with these kids in a way that I think is very familiar for a lot of people. I think a lot of people understand the dynamics of a team, and it's been proven time and time again in studies that the dynamics on being on like your little league baseball team, learning how to work with others, work with a coach, how to compete, how to lose, how to win in the right way, really help you grow as a person by leaps and bounds. And I think a lot of these kids that haven't really gotten to grow up playing those sports for whatever reason, esports and gaming communities can really help provide that opportunity to learn those very valuable life lessons in a way that you may not be getting if they're not involved so much with little league sports.
Yeah, I think like one of the big things that esports brought to younger demographics in particular was, it's not just you're sitting around in front of a screen playing a game, right? There's something bigger than that to everything you're doing, right? You're competing as part of a team. You're learning, time management skills. You're learning how to operate as part of a bigger unit, how to potentially scale a business if it's a club where you're responsible for generating revenue and whatnot. It just helps, I think, differentiate between, look, everyone understands, binge watching Netflix or, just sitting in front of your computer playing a solo, game by yourself, like that is a form of entertainment, right? And that's something that you're doing to relax and whatnot. But there is something bigger where you can get a lot of those kind of intangible skills that Hawk was mentioning that maybe some of these folks are missing out on from not being a part of traditional sports that they can get through esports, right? And I think that's such a huge part of why having esports at the high school level, at the collegiate level is really important, where it is giving kind of these folks who might miss out on some of those skills opportunity to acquire them that they might not have otherwise.
So here's something in chat that says, competitive League of Legends taught me more about communication than any school course or project. Right. Well, not to discount school, but sorry.
No, I totally agree for what it's worth, right? Like
Me too.
One of my first interviews I ever did when I was working at Monumental was, someone who was asking me like, what did World of Warcraft teach you? And I was like, it taught me everything, right? At that point in time to play World of Warcraft at a really high level, it was basically like a part-time job, right? Like, and it's not to discount that there's not high schoolers who have part-time jobs or whatnot, but like, how many part-time jobs do you have where you're a part of a group of 40 people or 25 people who are all relying on you in high pressure situations 4 times a day, and if you stand in fire, 24 other people yell at you, right, and blame you for wiping the raid or whatnot, right? Like it was incredible for me in terms of structuring. Well, I need to study before raid time. I need to study after raid time. I need to make sure I have this much time before homework or after homework, right? It really provides a lot of those life skills that enable folks to be successful in college and their first careers and whatnot. And look, it's not to say that there's not folks who can. It's not to say that there aren't kids who will abuse, the games or not follow kind of and create kind of that structure. But I think for folks who are able to see competitive video gaming and esports as kind of that tool to build on, to build that kind of structure to their life, it can make folks incredibly successful. Hawk, Aaron, and myself, and really provide the foundation for them to be successful later on in life.
So kind of launching off of that, we have a question from Bowser here, I think, which is, what do you think is the most helpful thing that we can do as an esports community to continue to drive the widespread acceptance of esports?
I think a lot of it comes down to really driving with the decision makers at the end of the day that can help to integrate things at an earlier and earlier level. I think about how, going back to the Little League example, I was basically indoctrinated into Little League baseball without even thinking about it at the age of 5. I was just like in it because like baseball is such a huge slice of Americana that of course I would be on the Little League baseball team, but like we don't really have that same sort of level of acceptance or even those even levels of opportunity for kids that could be future gaming or esports stars, or they don't even have to be, is I think the more important point, that you don't have to be the next faker or whatever it might be, or super, to be someone that could gain or benefit something from being a part of esports. And I think the way to help fix that is to find more ways for decision makers, find more ways like this, doing panels like this that can help educators, that can help teachers, community park districts better understand the value that can come from esports and gaming, and then help drive that to create and implement more programs like, I don't know, 5 to 7 League of Legends year olds playing League of Legends, or maybe something a bit easier than that, like Rocket League. But I think that that's the way you start doing it, is you start identifying and working with these decision makers to help them better understand the benefits, and then go from there.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different levels to that question, and thanks for that question. It's a really important one. I think depending on where you kind of fit on the scale of professional versus collegiate versus high school, or just casual esports, right? It's all about how do you get time to explain what esports is, right? And I think, look, no matter what job you work, whether it's in corporate America, whether it's in esports, you're always vying for someone's time and attention, right? And rarely do you get the amount of time and attention that you want to be able to coherently explain your topic, or your thought or whatnot. And so it's, how do you get that principal? How do you get that one teacher who's shown an interest, to sit down and have a conversation with you about, hey, here's why we should start a club. Here's why esports is not just kids wasting their time playing video games, right? Here's why, folks who play esports are more successful, more likely to go on to do X, Y, and Z, right? It's not easy, right? There's tons of times where you'll get told no, you'll get told, hey, I don't have time to listen to this, like send me an email, right? Or come back to me in 2 weeks or whatnot. And I think for folks who are really dedicated to growing the industry of esports, it's really continuing to push for those moments and those opportunities, like Hawk mentioning, and get in front of an actual decision maker and say, hey, I need 15 minutes. I have the best pitch of your life, and I'm going to tell you why, we should have an esports program, why esports is important. And that's how you kind of start building really widespread adoption, and kind of converting folks who they're, I don't think any of us would feel weird saying, like, there is distinctly a negative stigma around gaming and esports, right? It is, we are all sit in our basement, we eat, Cheetos and drink Mountain Dew, and we don't go outside, right? And we're not well-adjusted human beings, right? And look, we collectively, as at the professional level, I think have done a lot of work, kind of fix, kind of showing that that's not the case, right? In terms of, we have nutritionists for our players, they work out, right? Like we do see them more holistically as true athletes. But the more folks at every level of the industry who can kind of help explain and really educate folks on what exactly esports is, that's how you kind of gain, I think, the widespread acceptance that traditional sports has in terms of basketball, or the NHL, or football or whatnot.
Yeah, and just for those watching, I want to reiterate, you guys can ask any questions you want. We'll try and get to them like as soon as we can, kind of once we finish our sentence. So to kind of like hop off that, especially with like starting to like further this acceptance of the esports, I imagine like what a lot of parents, like what they've seen, at least on the esports side of thing, is the kid grinding Fortnite like 12 hours a day, or like, at least for the teens, like grinding Valorant or Overwatch, like all day. As far as like just like in-game skill sets, which obviously does come from like practice, what's other ways in which kids can like hone in skill sets that do help them within esports that is beyond like game sense, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think something we mentioned earlier around communication, I think probably makes a lot of sense. In particular, when you're looking at kind of making that jump from like the YMCA style pickup game style approach to a game to a more organized format of game. Communication probably is that first step. Um, and I think a lot of times we see players, even players that work for us, um, go into like those like what we would call like a ranked game, which is kind of like that. You're just kind of playing with other people on the internet. We're not playing an organized practice with the team. They're just going out there and playing with other people. They often go into those sessions with goals. So I think goal setting is really important. They go into those games and they don't just say, oh, I want to win as many games as possible, because at their level and frankly all the way down to the lowest level people playing the game, if you're just kind of going into it to play the game, that's fine. But that probably isn't the approach that justifies like a 12-hour gaming day, right? Then you're just kind of like you're doing it as something to relax, like watching TV, which like we all like to do, and that's something that's healthy every now and then. But if you're going to start putting in those larger time investments, and in particular as a parent, if your kid is trying to justify that as, oh, this is something I want to do professionally, this is something that I want to do as like a hobby that I want to push the limits on, I think goal setting is like a really important part of that, and that's something that's both healthy for them to develop in game and out of game. Saying there's a healthy way to go about a relaxing hobby, but if you're going to try to justify it as something you're going to grow in, a great way to track that growth and to really force that growth is with goal setting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a parent, and I'm certainly not going to pretend to understand all the intricacies of parenting. But I think like one of the biggest things you can do when you have a child that's really interested in gaming or video games, is just try to understand what exactly they're doing, right? And I know it's difficult. I don't pretend to understand everything that my girlfriend does in her job. I don't pretend to understand what some of my coworkers do, right? But like, take the time to really understand, like, if they're playing a game like League of Legends, you can't pause a game of League of Legends in the middle of it. Like, if I had like $10 for every time my parents told me to pause a game of World of Warcraft, when I was raiding in WoW, like, you can't pause it. It's a live game. Like, there's not a pause button. And so like, I think if parents, and look, it's no different than like you can't pause a game of Pac-Man, right? Like I really wish I could go back in time to when my dad was like playing Pac-Man against my mom in a bar and be like, just pause the game, like just pause it for 5 minutes, right? Like you can't do that. So I think as a parent who has a child who's really interested in video games or esports, try to understand what they're doing, and then build kind of a program that works around their interests, right? If it's League of Legends, okay, like maybe they get 2 ranked games of League of Legends, and here's their goals. They have certain targets for, they need to be gold by a certain month, they need to be platinum by a certain month, right? And like help them achieve them the same way that you would help a traditional sports athlete throughout high school who's maybe they joined the team as a freshman, they want to qualify for JV, they want to be on the varsity program by the time they're a junior, right? Like everything has kind of you can tie it back to something that's exists already and is structured in traditional sports. And I think it really is kind of like an educational barrier and a time investment that parents need to make that kind of eventually enables their kids to be successful.
So with that, so say you're like either between the ages of like 13 and 18, or even maybe you're like somebody who's just graduated high school. What's the best way for somebody, whether it's either going pro or even kind of doing what us kind of as a lot do in terms of like management and kind of marketing and things like that? What would you suggest to them to do to kind of start getting their feet wet and start making connections within esports?
I think for me, my personal recommendation is not to put all of your eggs in the esports basket.
God, this feels bad. Don't steal my line, Aaron.
Because I think, I mean, if you look at Grant, myself, and I think I'm not sure if this is true for Hawk and Ivy, but I think for most people that have really found a successful career in esports, often the way that you get there is you develop a successful career in something else. You develop a hobby in esports, and then you apply these skills and the training that you gain somewhere else into esports, and you're a total rock star. It's the people that kind of have put themselves in the esports bubble, and might not understand the discipline or the kind of demands that a regular job might place on them. And again, like maybe 5-10 years ago, you could just kind of have the esports connections and that would be enough. But as we're kind of in this really positive wave that we're talking about, where esports is becoming established, where there is this higher expectation, you want to have a good skill set to fall back on. And some people are going to have that naturally, but most are going to want to develop that in school with a different career or something with that background. And Grant and I do a fair amount of hiring, and that's something that we always look for. I mean, you want to look at everyone's resume seriously, but what we really like to see are skill sets that someone has applied in the real world, and then they can bring that into esports, as opposed to someone that just kind of comes in and says, "I've been in esports my whole life." That's almost a bit of a red flag. It's like, okay, so like what, like when you kind of get hit in the head with like the realities of life, are you going to be able to handle that? So I think that's a really good. That's also something that, like, again, like when we're talking with parents or when we're trying to talk about like the safety net of getting into the industry, that's a really healthy way to go about it. And instead of just saying, I'm going to just kind of willy nilly just kind of put, again, all of the eggs in one basket. I'm going to keep using Grant's metaphor. It's I think it's a really healthy way to go about it. There's other ways that work as well, but that's the way that I've seen that worked for me, and I think that's a successful mix in our hiring processes as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like esports scales, right? You look at what publishers and teams have looked for in terms of hiring, and it's seasoned executives and performers in traditional sports, in the investment banking world, in the consulting world, right? It is folks who have a passion, right, for a video game. Maybe they played video games growing up, but they have an immense skill set that they've developed over the years in other traditional industries that they can apply to a rapidly growing industry that is esports, right? And so I think, if I look at how I would go about advising someone who's looking at getting into esports, or is just graduating high school or whatnot, it's continue your passion, right? By no means I think would any of us suggest, like, man, you really like League of Legends, just stop watching League of Legends and go to school, right? Like that's not the answer. It's look at League of Legends, and I think one area that Aaron and I focus on all the time is pick what area you want to specialize in, right? Like if you're very passionate about coaching, like look at how you can be a coach. If you're passionate about marketing, like there's so many people nowadays who just say, I want to be in esports, and they just put their hand up and they're like, I want to be in esports. And we're like, okay, but like, what do you want to do? Right. And I think for us, like, it's great when you have somebody who has taken the time to kind of be a little bit introspective and say, you know what, I went to college, I got a 4-year degree in marketing. I've kind of studied how other teams in LCS or OWL are kind of, putting together, are approaching marketing. Here's something I think your franchise could do different or do better. Like, I would love to join your organization and help you guys achieve that, right? Like, that's the candidate that we want. And I think, if you're a parent, kind of helping guide your child down that path of, hey, you can go to school, you can still continue to play, you can continue to be a part of, esports and follow it and be passionate about it, but like really apply, really look at the industry from a, how do I fit in perspective, rather than just, hey, I'm a fan, right? I think that's the advice that I'd have.
So we have a question in the chat here from the Kevin Mob, and this is for everybody, which is, what has been your most memorable esports experience?
You didn't warn us there'd be like tough questions, Ivy. This feels a little hard.
This is hard-hitting journalism right here.
This is like hard. It's like a Jacob Wolf bomb right here. I don't know how to react right now.
I would say probably my biggest experience, my most memorable experience so far, was the day I got the offer letter from Brett Lautenbach to join Energy Esports, because that was kind of the day where it felt like the effort I'd been putting in for several years to try and get into esports, and I'd been working at a sports marketing agency before, and there's always a bit of an interpretation on someone coming from the sports background coming into the esports space and stuff like that. I was worried that it kind of wasn't ever going to happen for me, and so when I finally got that offer letter, that was kind of like the moment that to me felt like all the hard work I'd put in had paid off, and so that's probably been the most memorable experience so far.
I'm going last, Aaron. You're not getting out of this one.
So I mean, we'll see. Maybe I'm stealing Grant's thunder again. So for me, for the Washington Justice, our team has been in the league for a little while. It was as I mentioned in my bio, my second team that I was with in the league. And also, as I mentioned in my bio, I started pretty low down. I was like an analyst assistant, making very, very little money when I first started in the industry, and I kind of worked my way up to like a full-time analyst, to a coach, to an assistant GM, then finally to this role. And the Justice had been a team that had been struggling for a while, and there was kind of like a moment where Grant and I actually kind of took the reins. He had come fairly recently to the organization. I had been fairly recently promoted. And to that point, I think I'd felt a little bit of like imposter syndrome, despite having like a pretty decent resume outside of esports. I looked around and I saw all these other people that had been in esports for 5 years, 10 years. And I was like, I've been here for like 2 years. Like, do I really have like what it takes to kind of take the reins and really do something different here? And Grant, myself, and that head coach that I mentioned, Supreme, sat down and kind of rebuilt the team from the ground up. And we took a team that was ranked 18th out of 20. And we went into the final playoff run, and we actually finished third in North America after that rebuild. And that for me was kind of where it clicked. That was up until that point. I had been kind of helping other people, other decision makers, try to like make their decisions work out for the best. And that was when I think we kind of got some really cool opportunities to have both the risk and the reward. And it happened to turn out to be a reward for us at the end of last season. So that was probably the peak for me. A really cool, I think, really validating experience for me and why I was in esports.
Yeah, we don't feel anything against Hawk and Energy, by the way. That should have been our 3-0, but we don't need to talk about that last year. It's all behind us now. It's fine. Yeah, that was definitely up there for me. I mean, I think the number one experience though for me actually was also last year. You know, we were scheduled to host 5 homestands. Homestands, essentially, for those who don't know, were 2-day weekend style events where essentially one of the Overwatch teams would rent out a venue and put on an event where 5 or 6 other visiting teams would fly in. You'd compete in front of a live studio, a live audience of 3,000 to 5,000 people, and we. I remember, I was sitting in a conference room in LA, and, Blizzard kind of presented this model of, teams flying in and out of market and, teams hosting these events. And I was just like, there's no way this works. And I actually said that. I looked at the people at my table and I was like, there's like zero way that we can pull these off. Like there's just no way.
I think I got that email. I think I got that email from you.
I was just
with the
what?
deck attached. What are they doing?
I was like, what are they doing? And of course, there were some incredibly smart people in the world, some of the best, event planners and production folks in the world. And as it became more and more real, all of a sudden, I'm sitting in, kind of on the upper tier of the venue the day before we open to fans, and I'm looking at like this stage, and I'm just like, wow, like we actually like built this. Like this is like there are doors that are going to open, and like 3,000 people are going to walk through them tomorrow. And that was just one of the coolest moments for me. Like I think when you're planning like one of those events, like you're just so lost in like, the foam fingers aren't going to get here on time. Like, can we do thunder sticks? Like, are the lanyards the right color? Right. Like, it's just all these like little things. And then all of a sudden, like the next day you wake up and there's like 3,000 incredibly like excited fans who honestly are not going to notice a lot of that stuff that you were stressing over for the past 6 months. And they walk through the door and you're like, wow, like this is why you do it. Right. That's what makes esports so special and so real. So yeah, putting on that event was really special. And then obviously, wish we could have had a few more without COVID, and hope we kind of can get back there real soon.
I can answer this too, but I don't know if I have necessarily one most memorable experience yet. I think in terms of the panel, I am definitely the youngest in terms of how long I've worked in esports. I only graduated university like 2 years ago, and before that, previously in university, I ran like a game developer group on campus, and then Bobcat Esports, which exploded into this whole big thing. So there's been like a couple high moments, but I don't know if this is cheating to say I have a couple. I'll try not to say a couple though. I'd say like I think like my most memorable experience so far hasn't been like one set experience. I think it's been things like seeing like parents with GG Leagues and like Parks and Recreation directors start to like understand, accept, and even get like excited about esports, like basically treating it like same like little league for soccer and football and things like that, and getting ready to like root kids in the community on and like treating it the same as you would treat like any other like sport that kids do. It's just it feels really gratifying to kind of see esports starting to become on that same level playing field as respect as you basically see with traditional sports too. And like that's the whole goal here, obviously, is to empower kind of these kids that are getting into gaming and not make them feel like outsiders. Like I think kind of the past years of us growing up did kind of treat like the gamer population, like which is like, you know, kind of like everybody else has said, recluses living in their basements, things like that. So which I know is kind of a vague statement, but you know, the more that we get closer to kind of having esports be kind of on that front line as the other sports, the sooner the community as a whole is going to get like healthier, and the sooner we're going to see like kind of an explosion of talent, I guess, with these kids and kind of their parents starting to support them and push them forward. So this is kind of wrapping up. This is one of my last questions, and this is also. Oh, actually, we have one from the chat here from Petty Cakes, which is, where do you all see yourself in 5 to 10 years? It's a very good question. That's actually kind of close to what I was going to ask, but I'll wait to answer this one.
All right, well, no one else wants to talk, so I'll take it first. It's really hard to say, right? I think, you know, when you look at the landscape of esports, right, you essentially have a few different paths that kind of endemic franchises take. You have your Digitosses of the world, where you have an endemic franchise partnered with a traditional sports organization, and you kind of recognize economies of scale across kind of the assets that the traditional sports franchise has already built. You have other entities that are focused on participating in franchise leagues, so your overactive medias of the world, where they commercialize their business across franchise leagues and sell large entitled sponsors across those teams, and then you kind of have the hybrids, right? Your Andboxes and Energies of the world, where you participate in both franchise leagues and then also have kind of an endemic brand that you sign influencers to, content creators to, and you try to build brand equity in the Holdco brand. And so I think for us at the Justice, we're kind of very early on in kind of that exploration process. So I'd like to see us kind of hopefully go down one of those three routes. And obviously I've said this at every job I've ever been at. I was like, yeah, I'll be here for the rest of my life, and I that very rarely seems to work out for some reason. But I think in esports, when you're on the team side, there's kind of like three places you go, right? You're either on the team side, maybe there's four places. You're on the team side, you go to the publisher side. Maybe you can group kind of the publisher and league side into kind of one bucket. And then you have the agency side, and then kind of lastly the brand side, right? And so I think for at least myself, I love the team side. I think it's probably the most startup-y, kind of scrappy side of the industry. Not to say that the publisher side and any of the other buckets are cushy gigs by any means, but I at least really like the team side. I think I'll be here for a while, and hopefully kind of work to scale down kind of one of those paths that I described. And I'm holding Aaron hostage, so he can't leave. So his answer better align.
Yeah, no, I think I really like where Grant started the description of kind of where we're hoping our organization goes. And for me personally, I really, really like my role. I think it's a really unique position where Grant sits above me, so he's a little bit more on the business side. Supreme, our head coach, who I keep referencing, sits below me, so he's a little bit more on the competitive side. But I really like where I am, where I have kind of a foot on either side of the fence. And my hope is that as we continue to grow in the ways that Grant is describing as an org, that more and more things kind of fall into this generalist bucket. I really like being that facilitator that as a team we're growing sponsorships, but I would love for us to grow, and I would love to work with players on helping them secure sponsorships. As we're looking at acquiring other teams, I would love to be able to like work with other general managers and kind of grow opportunities that way. So I'm my hope is that in the next 5 to 10 years, I'll be in a similar position, but I'm hoping that just to Grant's point, the scale of things that we're doing will continue to grow. Because that's really, really exciting to me. And we've even seen it in the couple of years that we've been here. Like the events that Grant was talking about, the sponsorships that we've been getting, it happens really, really fast. And the last couple of years have been pretty crazy. So 5 to 10 years, I can't even imagine. I'm hoping that we're knocking on the door of the NRG size orgs, not too far in the distant future.
That's what I like to hear. Some friendly competition. Oh God, 5 to 10 years from now. Honestly, for such a long time, my goal was just to get to be where I am now, to be working at an esports org. And I think a lot of people, especially people that are younger, that are just trying to get into the space, they kind of view working for the team as the be all end all, but they don't know even what they want to do once they get there. And I think that's how a lot of people struggle with breaking into the space, touching back to previous conversations where, okay, you want to work in esports, but what do you want to do? And it's like, you're not going to be clicking heads, so you got to figure out how to do something right. But 5 to 10 years from now, gosh, I would love to still be at Energy. Hopefully I still have a job by then. I haven't messed up anything bad or anything like that. But I really do believe in the company's vision for the future and how it intends to build things out over the next 5 to 10 years. And so would absolutely love to be a part of that moving forward.
I don't know if I'm supposed to answer this, but I just want to keep pioneering esports, especially kind of for the amateur level. I think something that's like very often forgotten is that every pro player needs to start somewhere. It's kind of the same way that I'm sure many pro football players did Little League football. I think we need Little League esports. Okay, so my last question is kind of a curveball, I guess I'd describe it. This can be as abstract as you guys want, or whatever you think. So my next question is, what is your prediction for the future of esports?
I think it's going to continue to grow pretty quickly. A lot of the things that we've talked about, in particular, like where I started this conversation, talking about like globalization. I mean, esports is something that is very resilient, right? It's something that hasn't been particularly knocked back by the recent COVID issues. It's something that is if people get like bored of a certain game, like the new game is on the horizon. There's like a lot of money that these investment groups are kind of pouring into this to grow. And I think despite the fact that when the Overwatch League has been plugged on ESPN's Twitter, there's a lot of get this gaming out of my traditional sports news sphere. It's decreasing, right? And I think that this is something that people are finding the excuses to get involved in. Like, I'm a huge NBA fan, and a lot of NBA fans, like we were just talking before this started, or at the beginning, we were talking about like the Shaq thing, and like Shaq has been is investing, Kevin Durant is investing, Karl Anthony Towns and Ben Simmons, they play these games on Twitch, and people are finding excuses to get involved in esports. The reason that I chose the Overwatch League of all of the different esports to get involved in is, for me, it was the league that was kind of leading the charge in modeling traditional sports. So we have like a regular season, like an on season and off season. We have playoffs. It's a little bit different than like the tournament structure that a lot of other esports are using. And for me, that's where I saw esports going. I wanted esports to be something that, you turn on ESPN and you get your NBA highlights, your football highlights, and then your esports highlights. And so I think that's still a reasonable goal. I think there are just so many natural advantages that esports has that just over time that it'll just naturally grow more and more, and people will find the excuses to get involved. So that's my hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll still like the cop out answer, but I'm just really excited to see what kind of unexpected things happen, right? I think like esports is in the spot where we all kind of know what's going on, right? Like Overwatch is what it is, League of Legends is what it is, Valorant was kind of the new kid on the block. We kind of know what that is, but like these publishers and game developers, as they create new IP, is like the world of esports can change tomorrow, right? Like how we saw with Fortnite, when Fortnite came out and attracted the celebrities that it did and the popularity that it did, like it kind of changed everything, right? Ninja went from being a Halo guy pulling 3,000 viewers to being a true influencer who kind of broke down all sorts of barriers, right? So I think for me, the next 5 or 10 years of esports, right, is just about being along for the ride. I think when Aaron and I interview folks and talk about hiring and bringing people into an on board to an esports team, the number one skill, at least that I look for, is, are you excited about waking up every day and not knowing what's going to happen, right? And if you are, and if kind of that unpredictability, that lack of necessarily kind of incredible structure to your day really excites you, then esports is a great industry for you, right? And if not, there's tons of other industries that are great fits for you, right? There's accounting, there's all sorts of jobs where you can wake up and know exactly that at 9:10, you're going to have a coffee with your boss, right, every day or something, right? And have that kind of structure to your professional life. So, for me at least, esports, it's all about seeing what the next 5 or 10 years holds. Hopefully, it's a lot of profitability for teams, profitability for leagues, and ultimately, kind of a lot of innovation on the IP side that creates all sorts of fun opportunities for all of us.
I don't want to repeat just what everybody else has said, but I think in terms of something we're going to see more of, and this is kind of the answer I give, is that we're going to see a lot more call it gaming entourages, I want to say. So, like, for example, I think often about how I hear stories of pro NBA players. They go out to the club and, oh, who's with them? It's Kevin Hart and like Jack Harlow or something like that. It's, this combination of multiple kinds of people that are at the top of their field, and they've all come together because they all appreciate what the other is doing. They find Kevin Hart funny, they love watching the NBA, and then they love listening to Jack Harlow or whoever it might be. I think we're going to see a lot more of this cross-pollination and crossover between the people that are at the top of their game from a gaming perspective, and then them integrating even more so with the top musicians, the top athletes. We're going to get to this point where people that are at the top of their field in gaming are seen exactly the same way as someone in the NBA or a leading musician or something like that. It's just another form of entertainment, and we're only at the beginning of what that means.
Awesome. So this has been super awesome to hear. All of you guys, like, ideas and kind of thoughts have been super helpful to kind of like demystify this whole environment. So I super appreciate you guys coming out tonight and kind of sharing your thoughts. For everybody tuning in, I super appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out tonight. We'll be doing more of these panels kind of later on, so stay tuned for things like that. Huge thank you to our panelists again, and I hope to see you guys around. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.